Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Through Her Lens Conversations on Reframing the Domestic. Just a few introductions before we begin today. Zubaan is a feminist publishing house and NGO that chronicles and participates in women's movements in India and South Asia. We are conducting this webinar as part of Zubaan and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation's Fragrance of Peace project, which aims to broaden the scope of research and literary work in the northeastern states of India by strengthening existing networks, building new partnerships, and facilitating cultural exchange. This webinar series is running parallel to the online photo exhibition Through Her Lens Reframing the Domestic, curated by me and Anisha Pradhan. Submissions are open and guidelines are on our website and social media. You'll also find the link to the submissions page on the chat box. You can also view the online exhibition and previous webinars through the link in the chat box. I'm Ridu and I will be hosting the discussion today. This is the third webinar in a series of conversations that hopes to engage with the issues of present challenges, the lockdown, the collapse of the public and the private space, the merging of paid, unpaid work, etc., and to see how all this is affecting marginalized communities in the Northeast. This series also aims to look at the element of visual research and what photography and archiving in a COVID and post-COVID world means. Now that the boundaries between the storyteller and the story has collapsed, where stories have turned inwards and the personal as political has been foregrounded. The topic of today's webinar is titled Complex Frames, Representation and Archiving Through Photography. Today, we will be joined by NayanTara Gurung Kakshapati, Junisha Khongwir, and Prashansa Gurung. Some of the ideas we will touch upon today are challenges of representation in archival processes, archiving in a COVID and post-COVID world, ethics involved in documenting marginalized identities, and increasing access and visibility of the archives. We have changed the format slightly from our previous sessions in order to make it more interactive. So today we will start by posing a few questions to the speakers, which will cover some essential concerns of the theme of archiving and documentation, following which we will take audience questions. If due to time constraints, any questions go unanswered, we will send them to the speakers. And when the recording of the seminar is uploaded on YouTube, the responses will be posted in the comments. I would now like to introduce our speakers for today in the order of their speaking. Junisha Khongwir is an alumna of AJK Mass Communication and Research Center, Jamia Millia Islamia University, New Delhi. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Mass Media, St. Anthony's College, Shillong, and teaches live studio productions. She was the festival coordinator director of the Shillong Photo Festival in 2015. She's also curated other photography exhibitions in Shillong in the past 4 years. She is part of the working committee of the Northeast India AV Archive. When she is not teaching, she picks up photography projects and enjoys the journey by telling stories of the people she encounters. NayanTara Gurung Kakshapati lives in Kathmandu, Nepal, and works at the intersections of visual storytelling, research, pedagogy, and collective action. In 2007, she co-founded Photo Circle, a platform that facilitates learning, exhibition making, and publishing opportunities for Nepali photographers who are working in increasingly transdisciplinary ways. In 2011, she co-founded Nepal Picture Library, a digital archiving initiative that works towards diversifying Nepali social and cultural history. NayanTara is also the co-founder and festival director of Photo Kathmandu, an international festival that takes place in Kathmandu every 2 years. Prashansa Gurung is a storyteller raised in Darjeeling who has been using the mediums of still and moving images to document and relate intimate stories with a focus on gender and sexuality. She's worked on several film and photo projects across India and is the founder-curator of Pictures Against Prejudice, started in 2011, which is an international art exhibition with a focus on Indian LGBT lives. Her latest venture is Darjeeling, a Himalayan lifestyle brand from Darjeeling, which she also sees as a platform to tell stories, this time about the future. One of her work in progress includes Some of Us, a documentary feature film which she has been working on for the past 7 years about the experiences of Indian trans men from different parts of the country, where she is examining how maleness is lived, experienced, and perceived at various levels. I would now like to go over some rules for the participants attending today. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Your video and audio have been automatically turned off on entry. Please do keep them so. Audience questions will be taken via the chat box, which we will close once we get a certain number of questions that can be answered today. However, the raise hand function will still be available to direct any queries at the host, which is me, along with other hosts with Zubaan in their names. We will start dealing with audience questions around 4:45 p.m. once all three speakers are finished. If there's any speaker in particular you want to direct a question to, please make sure to mention that as well. The discussion will be recorded and posted online via our social media channels. The list of participants will not be available. If you choose to ask a question via the chat box or speak, your name might be displayed during the webinar. The entry has been moderated to guard against trolling. No hate speech, targeting, or discriminating against any community will be tolerated. Any participants using such speech will be removed from the webinar without warning. The speakers have given prior consent to be quoted outside of this webinar, so you're allowed to do so. So we will start with the first round of questions, and a good place to start and set the tone for the rest of the session would be for the speakers to introduce their work. All three speakers have very diverse practices, but we would like to focus their work in the context of today's theme of archival and documentation. So Junisha, would you like to go first?
All right. Thank you, Mridu. Thank you, Budisha, and the entire team of Zubaan for actually inviting me to be a part of this discussion. First of all, I think before we go ahead, I would just like to give you all my take on photography and what it is to me. I think photography explores that very intricate relationship between the photographer, the subject, and also the space. I think over the time as a practitioner, we've realized that it's very subjective, contextual, and also very fluid in nature because of its numerous genres that is there for, that's given to us. So it is very crucial to present our work in the most ingenious form. I think as an image maker and a storyteller, I think many a times, I think most of you would agree with me. I think, when it comes to showcasing our work, many a times we would hold back of, showcasing them because we feel that if we cannot represent them in the best way or in the best light, I think I would rather not show them at all. That when it comes to representation, I think time and time again we have to remind ourselves as photographers to be, of our responsibility from the time we take that photograph to the time we edit and sort them out and also exhibit or showcase our work out there. That is has to be dealt with, utmost sensitivity and also respect. Coming to the other aspect of what we're doing, actually, I'm from Shillong, and at St. Anthony's College, in the mass media department, in collaboration with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, we have started the Northeast India the Archive in October 2019. Yes, we are just a few months old. We're very young. We're here to learn and get feedback and all of that. So what the archive endeavors is that we want to facilitate an activation of memories that have long been forgotten or are in the process of being forgotten. And that also, it plays a significant role in, as a repository of the legacy that we have here of all the 8 states that we have here in our region in India, and also the means of collecting knowledge and documenting history over time. Right now, the material that we have ranges over from, documentary films to newsreels and amateur footage, sound recording, and also photography. I know we have a lot that we have to collect over the, over the next few months, and it is quite a mammoth task. So I think what we've done is we basically have divided our work into kind of phases. So right now, the first phase is basically sorting out work which is at risk, in preserving them, so that, later on, if anything happens, we can go back. You can always come back to the archive and sort them out, and you get a kind of a platform to also take them, see them, watch them, analyze, and also to kind of have discussions over it. So I'll just like to show you a few of what we're doing. So Mridu, I'm going to share my screen right now with you. So yeah. Okay. So I guess everyone can see the screen right now. So this is what we've been doing. A couple of months ago, last year, we acquired a whole bunch of old photographs that it was about to be thrown away. And so what we did was we actually collected them and actually put up an exhibition. So uh, and the exhibition was held on the 21st of January, which is also Meghalaya Day. And when we talk about activation of memories, I think this has got plays a very vital role. I mean, like, we saw how the reaction of the people were when they saw these old photographs, and the kind of, and some of them even wanted us to even if ask us if it could be a mobile exhibition, whereby to bring it to their town or to bring it to the villages, because it kind of and some of them even pinpoint, oh, that's my grandmother or that's my great grandfather. So it kind of that kind of whole process of actually refreshing our memories and taking back into time, whereby stories have been told in that moment. I think that was something for us that was very encouraging as an archive. So this is our space right now. This is where we have the booths, and yeah, the archive is both online and offline, but we have more material offline because of copyright issues. We don't want let all the material to be available online, and yeah. So this is what we're doing right now. I think Mridu, that will be my introduction, and what the
Okay.
kind of work we're doing for now.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much, Janisha. We'd now like to move on to NayanTara.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here and be sharing our work with you all. So I'm just going to share my screen and throw up a few images as we go, um, and tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So I wear different hats, but today I'm presenting some work here from the Nepal Picture Library, which is a digital photo archive that we set up in 2011. We're based in Kathmandu. And essentially the work that we're doing is really seeking to, in a way, interrogate mainstream making work, and really bring into the folds archives, more inclusive archives that are from the margins, but really tell us more about our social and cultural history. So very much like what you just shared, Junisha, we started out with collecting collections from a range of individuals, also professional photographers, institutions, that were interested in a way to preserve their own histories, because it was not being preserved otherwise. So this is where the archive lives, basically, in Kathmandu. We're a very small space. It's a multi-purpose space because we are also part of Photo Circle, which is a photography collective, and we also run a festival called Photo Kathmandu. The project I'm sharing today with all of us is the Feminist Memory Project, which is, again, essentially an initiative that tries to create a visual archive of a feminist landscape, a sort of repository of women's histories in all their multiplicities here in Nepal. The project began with a team of 4 researchers. The team was led by my incredibly brilliant friend and colleague, Diwas Raja Kisi, who has a background in history, but also in film and working with various visual practices. The team also included Augustia Thapa, who was part of the Zubaan series last week, Nikita Tripathi, and Nisha Rai. So this initial team of 4 members, 4 researchers, spent about 6 months collating, digitizing photographs, but also a lot of other related material. that really looked at sort of diverse aspects of the Nepali feminist heritage, as well as try to sort of dig up through oral histories, through testimonials, through various other materials that we were being able to gather through our contributors. A sort of wide, a wide sort of index, put together a wide index of these experiences. Somewhere in an interview, I think somewhere, Divas has written, and I really want to use this quote, that the process for us was really about listening very patiently to people's accounts of themselves and of others, and of thinking about how these accounts can be brought out in the visual form. We are coming from various practices of visual storytelling, image making, etc. And so sometimes, we were looking for narratives to be illustrated by photographs, and other times we would really let the narratives emerge from photographs that contributors were bringing to the project. I think one of the hardest parts of the project was really unearthing stories about more obscured women, especially as they also happen to belong to poorer and marginalized communities. So at the moment, since its initiation, the archive holds about 8,000 images, but it continues to evolve, and so it's an ongoing project for us. At Nepal Picture Library, the project has for us really been a very exciting.
Hi, NayanTara. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So would you like to take a minute, or?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up. So
Just
talk a little bit about sort of archive building as being sort of history making, and creating of an index of various chapters of the Nepali feminist experience. That will hopefully now, that's the hope, that it is sort of embedded into broader trajectories of Nepali history. So by way of introduction, I'll stop there, and then we could go on later.
Okay. Thank you so much. Prashansa, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. Can I be heard? Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes,
right,
yes.
good. First of all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and this platform, and to be, in the same panel as such esteemed photographers is such a big honor for me. I would like to introduce myself. I think I fill in the queer and the trans dialogue in this conversation, and I would like to begin just by quickly giving screen sharing my previous project that I did for Zubaan, which was, it was published in Centerpiece. Is it visible? Yeah. So it was a documentary photo series, photo essay on this northeastern makeup artist called Josie Paris, who is based out of Bombay. And she's a very well-known costume designer and costume person. So I traveled to Goa to photograph her, and it was a big learning experience for me. So these are just few photos. I just want to touch upon them, just very little, just to give a brief background about with the trans community. Yeah, like this is her interacting with the artist, and just generally being on set, being a boss lady, overseeing the scene, if everything, all the costumes are in place. And that's her. Okay. This is her domain. This is a kingdom. All the boxes are full of costumes that she's brought for the actors. And being on set is a very testing, trying. It takes a lot of strength. So yeah, got a high rate. And yes, inevitably you fall asleep because you're so sleepless. But this is just a brief background of my work. Um, I would just like to touch upon what photography means to me personally. So for me, it's a very, very personal practice. It is how I make sense of the world. It's like if, when things go bad. I'll give you a recent example. Like my mother had to be taken to the hospital, and at that time, I mean, obviously, I was concerned for my mother, but the only thing I could do was take out my phone and start taking pictures of the hospital. Okay, so that is just an example of how photography. I use photography to adapt. It's like when I start taking pictures, I enter into this different realm, and so uh, the work that I'm currently doing isn't directly related to archiving, but I guess it could be considered uh, as a perspective. It can be taken as a perspective from a queer person and how I experience being in the public domain over here in Darjeeling with my work that I'm doing through Darjeeling. So as I said, Darjeeling is a Himalayan lifestyle brand, which is an aggregator of all things Darjeeling. And I started working on it last year. And during the course of 1 year that I've been working for it, a lot of it involves going out and meeting people and in the marketplace. So what you find is that in the market, so photography by default is archiving, is my view. So and you will see that and as I'm working, I'm also taking photographs, not for the sole purpose of archiving, but they become archiving by default. So um, when we speak about queer and trans identities, the topic of the body also comes in. I would like just to touch upon that also in a while. But here in this picture, what I really wanted to show is this is 2 to 3 days after the lockdown was implemented, and you will see how in the public domain there there is one woman for about 15 men. So traditionally, historically, that is how it has been, right? So for me, to be a woman and doing this work also means transgressing that boundary, creating and taking up space in the public, and that comes with its own set of issues. But I feel I have been able
Hi,
to
Prashansa.
yes.
Would you like to wrap up?
Yeah. So this is yeah, it's just that, like, I think my topic is that, like, how we are transgressing, and at a world level also we are transitioning from one system to the other, where we're talking about COVID changing the world, and also uh, like your write up rightfully encapsulates how the boundary between the storyteller and the story is collapsing, and we're finding more and more that it is a journey inward. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Prashansa. So we'll just move to the second question, which is about the issue of representation. So this is a twofold question. So the first question about, as photographers, as archivists, you choose to talk about a certain story about a specific history and preserve certain memories. So how do you not privilege one story over the other? Or how do you privilege community over the other? So this idea of representation, how do you negotiate that? That's the first bit of the question. And the second is, how do you bring in your own identities, whether it's gender or whether from a certain region, and how does this affect your work in terms of access to spaces? Again, Junisha, would you like to go first?
Okay. Okay. So when we talk about representation, I think be it gender, representation of gender, ethnicity, or marginalized communities like ours, I think it's very crucial to study the construction, the mediation, and also the selection of the subject from a very sort of a broader yet subjective perspective. I think we have to understand that the power of the visual media and what it has towards its audience, I think how it can shape the audience knowledge and understanding of the exposed work that we are putting in. I think that has to be considered, a priority. I think as we look at things around us, I think our learning capabilities over the years have become really more focused and kind of intimate. We no longer go by, general descriptions of anything anymore. Like if I'm a Khasi and you want to learn more about me, you can't just Google and say, who are the Khasis, and then you expect that from the articles or from Wikipedia to kind of come to a conclusion of who we are as a, as a race, as an, about our identity. So you can't really come, in conclusion to that. I think for me personally, I think we've come a long way of basically the notion of stereotyping. Let's just bring that a little bit here of from Joseph Dalton Hooker's book on the journal, the Himalayan Journal. I don't know if any one of you have read that, whereby he describes the Khasis and the Garos as savages and performing human sacrifices during the 1800s, to still the ongoing thing of looking at us and saying that we are rock stars, and we are all since we come from this side of the land, the rock capital. So it's kind of amusing but also sad at the same time. I think it's because of the work that has been constantly put out there. I think it was not kind of delved deeper. So I think we need to go in deeper into these kind of understanding of the spaces. Okay, so when we talk about space, I think to me I have like I would like to categorize it in three concepts. That is space in terms of the juxtaposition. I think as a photographer, I think that is so important of how we frame our subject. That is, in regards of what is there in the background, the middle ground, the foreground. I think that is very, very important. The second thing of space is that I want to talk about the space that is the proximity between the photographer and the subject. Who am I as a photographer? Am I a person who would take a telephoto lens and click the and take a photo of my subject from a distance, or am I a photographer who would take a 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter and go up close and get stories from the subjects that I am getting the stories from. So, and the third concept is basically the third concept of space is basically that of the environment of where I come from. Who am I as a photographer? What is my knowledge, my understanding, my culture, my identity? The same with my subject. Who is he? Where is he coming from? So taking all this into consideration, I think it's really worth analyzing. And I think when it comes to for us as an archive, I think it starts right from the image maker or the producers or the filmmaker, whoever is giving their work to us. I think we as an archive, I think we have a very clear role of that we are we are collecting work, we are preserving the work, we are cataloging them, so, and also it gives the platform for everybody to discuss. We give you that platform to discuss over these things. So I think we're very clear on that. So talking about representation, I would just like to share a story of my kind of my own experience when I exhibited in one of the exhibition. I'm going to share my screen right now, Mridu.
Yeah, sure, Junisha. Go ahead.
So I'm going to show you these images. Okay. So I can see, you can see the, the bows and arrows there, and then going to the next photograph, people carrying, again, bows and arrows. So these photographs, if you look at them, have a same theme actually. So basically, these photographs have been taken near my village in Latlinpot. That's where I come from, and also in Mauklang, which is very close to my village. Well, I did not not want to, somebody question of asking whether these are hunters. First of all, they're not hunters. They are basically archers, because we still practice archery around here. But that's not the story also that I wanted to tell here. The story was basically, if you notice, all the men are wearing these flannel, the check shirt, the check shawl. So when I went to photograph them, I've asked them, asked them the same question. Like, I think if you see in the background also, all of them were wearing shawls. So for me, that was very, very interesting, because when I was growing up, I always hear, and always people would make fun of the men from my, from my area, which is from my village, saying that they're all Superman, because they always kind of clad themselves in these shawls. So what I did was not really to show what is archery or the art and craft, but it's just a piece of cloth. And what is it? Why is it so significant to them? So I asked them, like one of them, I asked them, why did you? I asked the same question actually to all of them whom I photographed. Why do you wear this cloth over, whatever you're wearing? And very simple answers, and very factual for that matter, saying that I wear it because I don't have anything decent to wear underneath, or because my shirt was dirty, or so I just take a cloth, take this check shirt, and just kind of flung them around. And then some of them said that because I don't have a good jacket, so I saw my wife, because even we always clad ourselves in these shawls, so some of them has taken their wives shawl as well. So these are the kind of stories which are so which kind of are very small, yet are so significant in our culture. I think that is why, if we just look at the bigger picture without any anchorage, without any statement, then people would think otherwise. So I think it's very important that we have responsibility over the photos, over the photographs that we take, and also give them a substantial anchorage, substantial meaning, and description of what is really is, especially when we send it to areas which are not basically in the area that we live in. That is because we know that photographs, they travel, especially now with social media. I think that has given a chance to kind of just goes far and wide. So that is why I think it starts from
Hi,
us as image
hi,
makers.
Junisha.
Okay, I'm gonna end this. So I think, like, again, I will repeat it again. It starts from us, the image makers, to kind of analyze what we're putting up out there. So yeah.
NayanTara, would you like to respond to the question? NayanTara, you have to unmute yourself.
Hear me? Yes. So I suppose something that I find really interesting after, Junisha's actually presence here also are these parallels. No, I think we, myself included, started out as an image maker, and the larger collective that I work with, Photo Circle, we are primarily a collective of image makers, and that's I think that's how we've really approached this work around archiving as well. And I think whether as image makers or as people sort of creating archives, I think that subjectivity in that process, of the telling of stories, I think is quite similar. And I think that's how we've approached archiving. There are definitely, obviously, as we all recognize, so many challenges when it comes to issues around representation that really require us to deepen our understanding of social, economic, and all sorts of other structures that we inhabit, and I mean, the need to recognize that none of us are exempt of that is definitely very clear. I think specifically to go back to the Feminist Memory Project, I think the team, who they were, their particular identities, their particular histories and politics, their particular interests, their particular work experience, and the networks they were able to tap into, but also not tap into, definitely shaped the project in very direct ways. And I think from the very sort of early stages of the project, we really tried to sort of build in this component of recognizing our own power and privilege while we do this work, and also those of others when they, plugged in and out of the project, whether they were contributing content to the project or engaging with it in different ways. Also, right from the start of the project, I think we were really clear on sort of approaching this as, creating a landscape where women's histories and women's experience was really sort of addressed in its multiplicity. Like even the movement, the feminist movement, really looking at it not at all as a monolithic thing, as an entity, but that there were various feminist movements within that, and it was also intersecting with various other movements. And so we wanted to be very sort of conscious about that as well in the process of taking this work forward. And also, I think sort of a framing for ourselves, the way we've been thinking about this project, but also a large part of the other work that we do around sort of more of the image making practices, more contemporary practices and practitioners we work with, has really been sort of this shift moving away from creating representations, but thinking about creating sort of indexes of experiences, and creating sort of databases and creating a wide array of stories to tell and experiences to encapsulate, and really like creating a sort of archive or a repository of various representations that speak to very particular pasts that then we are subjectively, sort of highlighting and drawing out. So I think when we're thinking of the image, the photograph, that primary medium that we engage with, really thinking about that indexical capacity of that, and moving away from the sort of more iconic roles that we typically designate. Moving away also through that, also away from kind of canons that that exist within particular histories also, and thinking really about more inclusive, sort of more diverse landscapes.
Thank you so much, NayanTara. Prashansa, would you like to take the question?
Yes. Yeah. Hi. So yeah, like when it comes to representation, right? Representation is there because of identities. And the thing about identities is that they're ever changing. We pick and choose our identities depending on the situation. Having said that, that is a very privileged point of view. It is it is it has come after going through a lot of questioning of self and the various identities that I have as a person. Again, like because photography is a personal practice, right? And mm, so like whether it be my identity as a woman, my identity as a queer person, or a person belonging to Darjeeling who has practiced in mainland India. So when it comes to my experience, for example, when Pictures Against Prejudice was started, the queer art exhibition, the reason it started was because there was a lack which I felt personally. Growing up, there was nothing queer around me, so I felt there was something wrong with me. And Pictures Against Prejudice was started to fill that void of representation. And in the 6 years, 7 years that we have had the exhibition, we find that the quality of the entries have been increasing day by day, every year. And at this point, we're not even, like we're still trying to see what queer art actually even means. So that is just the queer part of queer representation part of it. Now, when it comes to being a woman or a Northeastern woman practicing photography, photography as a practice is not gendered, but it is only when others perceive us in a certain way. So when I am in Bombay, I'm practicing in Bombay, I am seen as a woman belonging to the Northeast. So then there are two factors, two identities playing a role in how I am treated. And when I'm back home in Darjeeling, that comes with its own set of limitations. And the work that I'm doing in Darjeeling currently is not archiving as such, um, but it does provide me an insight into my own um, rights as a woman belonging to this society, to this culture over here, because there is this belief that northeastern cultures are more accepting of women's rights, but we forget that violence against women is not only always and the comparison is always made to North India, right? Like how there are no dowry deaths, how we allow our girls to go to school, but we forget that um, violence against women is not only physical violence, and that there are other subtler ways of withholding access. Uh, but in my personal experience, maybe because I am queer and there is a kind of gender fluidity in the way I exist. Different people view me in different ways. So, for example, in Darjeeling, the gang of friends that I have are all boys. And because of the COVID and because of the queerness added to that, I inevitably find myself being only around men. They treat me like one of the boys. And in some way, like it makes me feel good. But at the same time, it does feel like, um, in many ways, it does feel like a, a, a shortcoming of kinds as a cis woman. Does that make sense? So yeah, like it's what's interesting about the times that we are living in right now, as we are observing, is the shift happening in every sphere. So whether that be northeastern voices getting more platforms in the mainstream, or women taking up more spaces, and and even acceptance of LGBT rights. So yeah,
Yeah,
that
thank you
is
so
what I
much,
have to say.
Prashansa.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Prashansa.
thank you.
So we third speaker that also seems to popular question is about access and visibility. So how does one make an archive more accessible, especially with regards to the communities that you are, whose stories you are collecting? And especially when archives are housed in governmental organizations, it requires a very taxing bureaucratic process. So how do you increase access and visibility? That's the thing. Janisha?
All right. Like I said earlier, the Northeast India Archive does strive that from the very beginning. I think when we started off, because we are an institute whereby we produce a lot of material over the past 25 years. There's just been a lot of documentaries made, photographs that have been taken. So it's just been sitting in the department and nothing has been, done about it. It's just rotting in a corner somewhere. So that is how the idea, actually, we've always wanted it. How do we get this material out? I think the first thing is that for us, especially for us, it might be different for NayanTara and other archives, but for us, I think we are dealing here with very young minds, with these kind of students who are just kind of, they're doing their bachelor's and they want to learn more about what they are creating. So I think to get them interested in this project was that is one thing that was at the top of the priority list of the archive, is basically to make it a more popular and accessible one, without anything being tagged to it, or we are not like gatekeepers, so to say. Every material, I think, that comes our way right now, we have been accepting them. with the knowledge that we know that these material that comes in from outside, not only from the material that comes from the department, but also from outside, that is, it has its copyright intact, it's got everything that is basically ready for us to take it in and to house these material. So talking about the visibility and accessibility to it, I think we are not stopping anyone for that matter. We are not saying don't come and give your material because of so and so, or we can't show this material. I think anybody for that matter who is practicing, who is an academician, who is a research scholar, who is a student, even for that matter children from schools can always come and look and study at the material that we have at the archive. The second, I think you were talking about like how we are documenting right now at this time, on this unprecedented time. So what are we doing with the archive? So when we started the work, it's just been a couple of months old. So suddenly the pandemic happened. So we were thinking like, how do we get work going? So because everything that, since we were in the process of collecting these material from different states and from different, filmmakers and photographers. So we were thinking, now what? We can't just like sit back and just not do anything. So we've started under the Northeast India AV Archive, we have started a new project called CLUM. The word CLUM means pandemic in Khasi. So what we're doing is basically the CLUM will archive all the COVID-19 in Meghalaya. So this can be also as a source of encouragement to other, to other states and other places, whereby we are collecting all the material that has been generated so far. Content that the public has given out, and also content like basically what the government has been giving is like notification, press releases, videos, memes, fake news, by either by government or non-governmental organization. So that's what we're doing right now. The second stage of what we're also doing is also we're asking for contributors, because I think it is very important that in an archive to have work that not only has been taken from other from these organizations, but also simple work like what we're doing right now. I think as photographers, like Prashansa said, it's like, what can we do as since everything has stopped. I think the story really got me about your mother, Prashansa, when you said instead of taking her to a hospital, you take out your mobile phone. I think that has kind of happened to me as well. I think we are so like, when we go out shopping, we are, first of all, we have to wear a mask, then, get our things, and at the same time holding the camera and trying to shoot. So yeah, so I think the lens have kind of turned on ourselves as well, and how we document that space. So yes, so we're taking all these stories together, and later on, I'm sure most of you here, there are many researchers, scholars who would want to, who would, I think, already thought of a topic also to do on what to do with this pandemic. I think this, so we're here to have help you with the material. Maybe we are working on how do we make it more easy for people to access. So I'll just screen share you just the page. We are currently working on it, and um, okay, so that is basically the website that we have come up with. So yeah, you can contribute. Also, we are at that stage of contribution. We as an archive are collecting materials, and getting all these notifications, because I think notifications is one thing that I think each state is facing. I think the government is giving out notifications and after notifications, and you never know, you never know when these could be study material in the future. So that is why we have taken upon ourselves for our state to kind of make it a point to collect all these, and so that it would be readily available for people when they need it in the future. So yeah, so
Thank you so much, Junisha.
okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. NayanTara, would you, I think we spoke briefly about the afterlife of the archives over text or email. So would you like to take the question?
Yeah, I'll just throw a couple of images up as I speak as well. It's really interesting. I'm so curious to learn more about the Meghalaya archive, Janisha. So I'm looking forward to, we've already scheduled our post-webinar chat for next week. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. For us, it's really important, this idea of activating archives and, you know, the archive and creating engagement around it. And it's like dialogic possibilities is really important for us. You know, the last thing we want to be is like a dark, deep dungeon that, you know, people, you know, don't want to come access or can't come access, etc. So um we really focus on trying to create engagement at all levels, right? When we are sort of opening up the archive, we're really looking at this as a people's archive in many ways. You know, we started out with this sort of tagline that got caught on really well because people, you know, really wanted to be a part of it because, you know, the tagline is history begins at home, you know, itihas ghar gharबाट सुरु हुन्छ. And so, you know, even the context in which all of this work took place is also important. I think Nepal has had this huge transition politically where we've gone from being like this age-old monarchy to being a democratic republic, you know. And so I think this whole sort of aspiration for inclusion has been really huge, and that sort of timing of things also. So, you know, at the collection level, at the research level, we're really trying to engage diverse kinds of researchers and practitioners with the archive. We're really excited when, say, a journalist or an educator or, you know, somebody who's not necessarily from mainstream history work comes. And people get really excited when they see their family albums there, you know, when the vernacular suddenly becomes, you know, something that is more important, quote unquote. And the kind of then the meaning making that is then possible also. And we're actively trying to create curriculum by taking pieces of material from the archive, going into schools, working with friends who are teachers and educators. We've tried to make an effort to reach out to the curriculum department center here, and it's very much, you know, it's a laborious process liaising with the government, trying to get into mainstream curriculum, but we've been trying like, various experiments, and certainly feel like we know at least a bit more about where the possible ins are now. And, you know, I think for a large part, this idea of the public, I think for us is important at various levels, right? In terms of the sourcing, you know, whose archive is it? It's a public archive. But then all the way to sort of, you know, where it ends up is really, we would like for it to end up in the public, and for those sort of like cyclic engagements to be made possible for people to constantly be able to feel ownership over certain narratives, etc. At a practical level, the archive lives in our office at the moment, so people can access it on site. But at the same time, we are actually talking about this pandemic. One of the things we realized is, of course, you know, we had plans. Right now, we wanted to be out in the field doing a fresh round of research to feed into the Feminist Memory Project, but we're stuck at home. So we decided now is a really good time to work on our website. So the plan, you know, we've been really, the eventual goal for us to have is to be able to have the entire repository available online for researchers, for anyone who wants to access it. So right now, it's work. It's going to take a while, but slowly over time, I think as the annotation builds, as you know, as even the website builds, we're hoping to be able to create that kind of access as well.
Thanks, NayanTara. Prashansa, would you like to take the question now?
Yeah. Hi. So visibility and accessibility is the question, right? So I will, you know, it was lovely hearing NayanTara and Junisha speak about their experiences, and what I'm sensing from that is that, you know, how far behind we are in our process of archiving, you know. So it gives me a lot of homework to do, that there is a lot to learn. My learning about visibility and accessibility has mostly been through the Pictures Against Prejudice um, exhibition. And I would like to actually go to the basics. Okay, so, while we can be sitting here and be discussing, all the reasons why it should be and all our learnings, but when it comes to the basics, right, like, I feel the um, some of the issues could be like, first of all, like, even generating that interest in photography, not only from the audience perspective, but even from a practitioner's point of view. So photography is still not looked at as a very viable option. Forget women, for women, even for men, right? So, like, creating a buzz and creating the importance of the art form in archiving is the first step, I feel. you know so, and we can learn a lot from both NayanTara and Junisha in that regard. um, when it comes to accessibility, again, very basic, not related to art, but structures around, building structures, infrastructure for accessibility. And given the the access to technology that we have, and given how everything is going to be digital, so, how do we manage to build those infrastructures? And so I feel like the focus should be on setting up the infrastructures for visibility and accessibility for the work that is being done. So I think that is the stage where I feel that our town is at least in. So, I mean, of course, there is a thriving photography community in Darjeeling, but I'm sorry to say, but it's still a very boys club. you know um, you don't see many women speaking about it, or you won't even know, like, female photographers. Why does Zubaan call Prashansa Gurung again and again, when it comes to Darjeeling? It's because, not because there are no other photographers, it's just that they haven't had the access that I have had. And I got the access only because I was in a big town. So it makes me, aware of the privilege that I've had, the access I've had, and also fills me with a sense of responsibility of, that something needs to be done. So yeah, like, that is all I have to say about the matter. Mridhu? Mridhu?
Sorry, Nidhu is facing internet issues, so I'm just
Okay.
going to fill in for her. Thank you so much, Prashansa.
All right.
So the next question is addressed to any panelists, all of them who want to answer it. How does an image maker navigate the privilege they bring to the field by way of certain equipment, for example? And how does one make sure to not cross the boundaries of consent?
All right. Because, see, I I'm very on the field all the time. So, see, when it comes to consent, okay, like, wait, first, privilege. Um, I don't consider myself a privileged photographer, okay, because I don't even own a camera. I had a camera which was stolen 2 years back, and since then, any project that I get, I hire equipment. So I don't consider myself, like, there is this perspective that photography is a very elitist practice, but practitioners may not always be. So, and also all the photographs that I take, and some of them that I've even gotten published, have been ones that were taken from the phone. So that's one. And when it comes to consent, now this is where my view may be a little controversial. um of course, consent is important. And see, I never ask for permission before I take a picture. When I'm out on the street, and if I see something, I like it and I take a picture of it. I don't ask questions. Like, there's a kind of breaking the rule sort of a vibe when we're talking about a general street image. But when it comes to portraits also, if somebody outrightly says, like, I mean, I of course ask the person, can I take a photo? If they say no, then I move on. Or if I feel like there is some room for negotiation, and I try to convince them, and I always show the photograph to them after I've taken. And if somebody says no, I just move on. Having said that, when it comes to consent and the role of photographers in society, controversial, disclaimer, but we as artists, as photographers, we are serving a certain function in society. We as artists, we just feel more. We um, uh, we take on the pain, the joy, of humanity. We feel, and hence we take pictures, because that is the way we process. That is the only thing that makes sense to us. And if we don't take that photograph, then something inside, it festers if we don't. So I feel, given that we have chosen to take on this burden, I feel we should have free reign over taking photographs whenever we want. But yeah, like, it's a mixed bag. It's a balance. It's about balance, and every situation is different. So sometimes you just gotta assess the situation and know not to take a photograph. But as I have already revealed earlier on the session, there have been many occasions where I just start taking photographs without even realizing. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Prashansa. NayanTara, Junisha, would you also like to answer the question, or should we move on to the next?
I can just make a quick plug in terms of just to share in terms of thinking around consent when it comes to the archive, no? And something that we began realizing quite early on is because we were dealing a lot with personal histories. People were bringing stories. Family albums were also these sites of great intrigue, and sometimes sites of great uh, sometimes tragedies, and sometimes histories that families wanted to keep hidden, whether it was like an affair somebody had with somebody, and there was like a random picture of a man that shouldn't have been there, and then it arrived in our scanning tables, and then suddenly people realized, oh gosh, etc. So I think it's been really for us interesting to negotiate this idea of consent when it comes to the archive. But of course, at the end of the day, it's really up to the contributor, the people who are bringing the material to us. But we also keep room, because consent, we feel, is sort of an, it's not like it starts at one point and ends. It's a continuum. And so sometimes people start out by saying, yes, I'd like to give you this material and you can use it however, publish it, put it on the internet, publish, on mainstream media, whatever. And then down the line, we feel it's important for them to actually perhaps rethink some things or whatever, and come back to us and say, actually, I don't want that in there anymore. So on and so forth. So we try to sort of keep it open. And sometimes people start the other way around. They say, no, I don't want this out in the public domain, but I would like you to digitize it, and I would like for it to be part of my collection. But then somewhere along the line, they see other engagements around the archive, and then they change their mind. Also, we've had that experience several times, and then they say, actually, I really want to share this part of our family history with the public. So I think it's really been interesting to think about that, as a continuum.
So this will be the last question that we take today. So the question is looking inwards too much? If you're looking inwards too much, go on to create disconnected histories instead of weaving our histories together. Would that shield us against mainstream representations? So, NayanTara, would you like to take that question?
Sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like for us, the inwards or the personal archives or the vernacular um, have been the starting point, and I don't think that that's necessarily where we want to end. I think it's about taking that and trying to then connect it to yeah, larger history making processes, and as the question says, I think trying to weave that into wider conversations, and really trying to think about how, let's say, the life of one particular woman who was, an active member of civil society in Baque, and in the 60s, she had this very particular sort of experience, whether it was within the realm of her family world or her immediate community, and then linking that to sort of larger, often those links is what doesn't happen enough, I think. And I feel like perhaps, folks like us who are interested in sort of creating these spaces and catalyzing these processes, that's perhaps what we are trying to do. For sure, that's what we aspire to do more and more. Those links, though, are very important. So
Thank you so much, NayanTara. Thank you so much all with us today, Prashansa, NayanTara. So we do have a few overflow questions, which we will email them to you. Sorry, my internet connection is not very good today because of the weather. Yes, so we'd like to end the session, and thank you so much to Prashansa, NayanTara, and Junisha for being with us today. Our next session in this series is titled Online Platforms as Alternative Spaces for Representing Marginalized Artists, which is next Friday on 5th May at 4 p.m. The recording of other webinars in this series is now up on YouTube. You will find the link to those webinars in the chat box. Further, if you wish to watch the previous sessions on a crisis of care, feminist perspectives on the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown in India, you can go to our YouTube page. And you can also follow us on social media for future events. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so sorry for the bad connection today. Thank you so much. Bye.